Hello everyone, this is Sudipta from Technical Potpourri. As I'm learning machine learning, so I thought why don't I share my knowledge with you all, and that is why I've created this new YouTube playlist called Let's Understand Machine Learning. So if you are like me who wants to understand machine learning, please subscribe to my channel and please hit the bell icon so that when I'll publish more videos on this topic, you'll be the first person to be notified. So without wasting any more time, let's jump to the first video of this series where I'll be covering fundamentals of machine learning. So let's start with introduction of machine learning. What I'll be covering in today's video is what is machine learning and what are the different types of machine learning we have. So what is machine learning? Machine learning is basically a subfield of artificial intelligence which is broadly defined as the capability of a machine to imitate intelligent human behavior. In the year of 1950, AI pioneer Arthur Samuel defined machine learning as the field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without explicitly being programmed. So there are multiple definitions of machine learning available in the internet, but I think this is the best way to define what is machine learning. At a very high level, we have three types of machine learning. One is called the supervised learning, another is the unsupervised learning, and the third one is the reinforcement learning. So let's understand each of them one by one. So before we proceed further, it's very important to understand data because data is the main force behind the machine learning. So recently I've attended one session where I saw data was defined in a very unique way. And that was anything which you can record and retrieve later is data. So it doesn't mean that you have to record that digitally. It can be anything. Anything which you can record and retrieve later is called the data. And it is really a very interesting way to define data. Let me know what do you think. What is the definition of data for you guys? Put that in the comment section of this video. But as you already know, the data is the main pillar of machine learning. So let's understand a little bit more about the data. Data can be of different formats like image, audio, video, text. All these are different types of data. And when we store the related data, they are called the data sets. So datasets are basically made up of individual records that contain the feature and the label. Now, what is feature and the label? As you can see on the screen, this is a snapshot of a dataset. Here we have date, latitude, longitude, temperature, humidity, and then the rainfall. So all the things which are marked in blue, they are called the feature, and the rainfall is the label. So what we try to do, depending on the feature, we try to predict the label. Now, when in a dataset, where we have both the label and the feature available, we call this as a labeled example. But if I see this example, here we have only the features, we don't have the label. So now, if in your dataset you have only the features, but you don't have the label, then we call that as an unlabeled example. So this one is a labeled example and this one is an unlabeled example. So data can be of two types. One is labeled data and another is unlabeled data. This understanding is very important because this is the basic of how the supervised and unsupervised learning model will work. So what is supervised learning? Supervised learning is all about when the model will be given lots of labeled data to train from and discover the connections between the element present in the dataset. And once the model is trained, then the model is ready to make the prediction. There are two most common use cases of supervised learning. One is a regression, another is a classification. Now, what is regression? Regression is all about where you are predicting the numerical values. For example, depending on the size of the house, you are predicting the price of the house. Another example is depending on which date the flight is operating, how long the duration of the flight, predict the price of the flight. So that's called the regression. And what is classification? Classification is where the model is trying to predict the likelihood that something belongs to a category. For example, predict whether the email is a spam email or not. Predict whether the patient has this disease or not. That's called the classification. Now, classification can also be of two types. One is a binary classification, another is a multi-class classification. So what is binary classification? Binary classification is basically where we are trying to predict two things, yes or no. For example, whether there will be rain happening tomorrow, yes, or there will be no rain. If my model is trying to predict only these two values, yes and no, we call this as a binary classification. And what is multi-class classification? Multi-class classification means where it's trying to predict multiple values. For example, there can be rain tomorrow, there can be snow tomorrow, or there can be hailstorms tomorrow, right? So where the model is trying to predict multiple things, we call this as a multi-class classification. So that is a very high level of supervised learning. In supervised learning, we give the model the label data, and that data is being used to train the model. And once the model is trained, the model is ready to do the prediction. Think in this way: you are going to sit for an exam, but you are given the previous year's exam question and the answer. That's the level data. You are giving the exam questions and the answer. So you have both the feature and the level present, and that's called the level data. So you have given the level data. You are doing all your preparation based on the data, and once you are ready, then only you are going to sit for the next exam. So that is the way I try to understand the supervised learning. Okay, with that, let's move to the unsupervised learning. In unsupervised learning, instead of giving the level data, we are giving the model the unlabeled data. And the intention of the unsupervised learning is not to predict a number, rather to find out the meaningful pattern that is present within the data. Or in other words, how the model can categorize each piece of the data. So one of the common example is clustering. What is clustering? Now, clustering is not the same as classification, because in here, when you are doing the clustering, the categories are not defined by you. So instead of you define the categories, let the model define the category, and based on that category, do the clustering. So if you see the example here, the blue section is a cluster which represents snow. The yellow one is another cluster which represents rain, and the green one represents no rain. But how this clustering happened? Because when the data was given to the model, data was an unlabeled data, right? Because unsupervised learning is all about the unlabeled data. And when this unlabeled data was given, model will try to identify the different categories, and based on those categories, it will make a cluster. That is what happened here. As you can see in the screen, we have a cluster called snow, we have a cluster called rain, another cluster called no rain. So that's all called the unsupervised learning. So the biggest difference between supervised and the unsupervised learning at a very high level is that in supervised learning, the model will be given lots of level data, and that will be used to train the model. Whereas in unsupervised learning, the model will be given lots of unlabeled data, and that will be used to train the model. Last one is the reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning model makes prediction by getting rewards or penalties based on the actions performed within an environment. So one example of reinforcement learning where it is being used to train a robot to do certain tasks. For example, do the dishwasher cleaning or do clean the house, etc. So that is called the reinforcement learning. So this is a very high level of supervised, unsupervised, and the reinforcement learning. And this is my understanding as I'm learning. I'm trying to share my knowledge with you all. If you think there is something wrong, please correct me, and please put your comment in the comment section of this video. But each of this, it itself a huge topic. So in future, I'll be publishing videos covering individually supervised, unsupervised, and the reinforcement learning as I'm learning further. I hope you like this video. If you like this video, again, please hit the like icon, please subscribe to my channel. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.